So this is our first installment of a 7-part series that is designed to help educate our staff about the job functions, the responsibilities, and the qualities that we think are important for a project architect or interior designer at LS3P. So you guys might be asking, why are we doing this training? I mean, this maybe seems a little bit obvious, right? And what are we going to get from this? And I think most importantly, we hear a lot that there is maybe a perception that the only path for advancement at LS3P is that you have to work your way up from an emerging professional to an interior designer, architect, to a PA, and then you've got to become a project manager in order to sort of further your career. Which for a lot of you, I mean, if you're passionate about design, if that's why you went into this career, being a project manager may not be at the top of your list, and it may not be where your strengths and your talents lie. So today we really want to try to clear up that misconception and talk about the many paths for success at LS3P, and being a project manager is just one of those paths. We need talented designers, we need technical and detail-oriented architects, interior designers, as well as construction administrators, spec writers. We even have technology staff with design backgrounds. So these are all parallel and equal paths for our staff. And we've developed these sessions for those that are interested in pursuing their passion in design and how you can really develop your own career path. So Laura?
Sure. So the question then is, what are we looking for in a project architect? And so first and foremost is strong design skills. Most of us went into this profession because we love design, we love architecture and the built environment. And so utilizing those skills and that creativity and really kind of owning the design of the project is what we look for in a project architect. That's not to say that the PA is the only designer on a project, but the PA is tasked with making sure that design remains at the forefront of every decision that's made and making sure that the design concept is really carried through from conceptual design to the completion of the project and the groundbreaking. So, leading the design charrettes in-house and with the client, coordinating with the firm's design leaders, Brian and Danny, and getting them involved when necessary. And then again, just ensuring that the design is a priority throughout every decision. Graphic and presentation skills. The ability to graphically illustrate what our design thoughts are to the client or to others is really important. And then determining what is appropriate for that presentation. A presentation to the owner may be different than the presentation to an architectural review board or a public meeting. So determining what is appropriate for each presentation and then leading the effort in the production of those graphics and putting the presentation together and actively participating in the production of that information. And this also includes the construction documents, determining how we relay our information in the CDs to the contractor. Understanding the project processes. It's important for the PA to understand the process from start to finish and understanding that each project or each client or each market might have a different process for how a project needs to occur, and being able to recognize those different milestones and steps and ensuring that the project is hitting all of those goals and deadlines. Multidisciplinary knowledge. This means understanding all of the engineering, maybe not to the extent obviously that the engineers do, but understanding how the building goes together, from structural, civil, PM&E, any specialty consultants, any partner architects, and really being the point person for coordinating all of those efforts. And then proficiency in Revit. Kind of the best way to really understand the design of a project is to be actively engaged in the production of the design. And given that Revit is our main tool, proficiency in that program is important. But also the other tools that we use, SketchUp, the energy modeling, Enscape, Twinmotion, all of those tools, the project architect needs maybe not as proficient in everything, but have the knowledge to know when those tools would be more appropriate than something that's just straight out of Revit. And then technical production skills, again, and knowing how a building goes together, recognizing the details that are important to include in a project and being able to either lead the team in producing those or producing them yourself. And then, code compliance is essential to any project. It's not everyone's favorite part of a project, but it is crucial to the success of a project. And so understanding the code, understanding the implications that the code has in the design are important, as well as interfacing with the AHJs that will be involved in your project during design to confirm the design, but then also during construction when questions come up. A project architect, interior designer also needs to be an effective communicator. I read this quote that said, most people do not listen with the intent to understand, they listen with the intent to reply. And I think we've all probably found ourselves doing that as well, where we might ask a question and someone's answering and we're really not fully listening to what they're saying, or someone comes to us with something. And so being able to stop what you're doing, listen to what someone is saying to you, and then being able to act upon that as appropriate. Sometimes there's really no action necessary. It's just listening to your team member or the client or anybody, the public, for example, in a public meeting, but truly listening and understanding what is being said to you. Colleague interaction. Architecture is a very collaborative profession, and none of us are successful as a team of one. There may be some professions where that works, but certainly not in design. And so daily interaction with your kind of in-house project team is important, so you can relay information, answer any questions that people might have, confirm that the design intent is being maintained as the project progresses, ensure the details are well thought out and correct, and then also just touching base with the other members of your team, making sure that they're okay, they understand what the expectations are as far as their tasks or the deadline or, whatever is involved in the project, and that everyone continues to be on the same page every day. Empathy, this goes along with the listening. I'm sure we've probably all been on a project where we have felt, that maybe that our suggestions aren't welcome, or that we're not appreciated, or maybe we're just confused about what our tasks are and what our assignments are. So, for the PA, project architect, project interior designer, to really have empathy for the team and try to address any issues that might come up to make sure that the team is working effectively together. And then, of course, always act with the utmost professionalism in your day-to-day interactions with your in-house team, the client, consultants, and everybody involved in a project. And the project architect, interior designer is really a leader for the entire team. So part of having a strong work ethic is understanding that you are part of a bigger team and that no one person does everything on their own. So it's important to look at the team as a whole and recognize the strengths of each team member and figuring out how everybody can work together to support each other and enhance those strengths. Self-management, kind of being able to really determine what the tasks are, run them, without having someone say this is what needs to be done, but really anticipating what is coming in the project, whether it's a deadline or a presentation, or just incremental, steps along the way, and ensuring that you yourself are, accomplishing each of your tasks, but that the team as a whole is getting everything done at, in the appropriate time frame. And then a big part of leadership is motivating the team. I mean, it can be challenging to keep the motivation on a project, whether it's an extended schedule or a really quick schedule or a complicated project or, whatever it might be. Motivation can be a real challenge. And so, kind of being the cheerleader for the team is really important to make sure that everybody is working effectively and that the project will be a success. And, sometimes something as simple as a thank you or a little note that says, you're doing a great job, or, a Bojangles biscuit on their desk as they come into the office. Yes, Dean's excited over here about that idea. Sometimes it's something very small, but it means a lot to your team to know that you recognize them and you recognize the efforts that they're putting into the success of the project. And then being a mentor. I mean, knowledge is the greatest value that we have. And so sharing it makes everybody better. So, check in with your team members, see if there's anything that they could use help with, offer to sit down with them, sketch out a solution to a problem or a detail. Just be available to answer any questions and really just try to develop relationships with your team members and everybody, others in your office that you may work with, so that they know that you're available to help them with any situation that might come up in their project.
So next we want to talk about the qualities of an effective team structure and how our project architects and interior designers are a really critical part of that successful team. And I think the first most important thing to remember is there is no single one-size-fits-all formula of how the PM and the project architect and designers are going to work together for every project. I mean, we have so many different scales and project types. Sometimes the PA is the interior designer and they're the project manager and they're the chief bottle washer, right? We have to have flexibility, and so we don't always have very rigid roles that continue for every project. But the key is that from the beginning that we try to have a clear understanding as who's going to be doing what and how you can pitch in, stand in as necessary, and also support each other through the life of the project. And I think the real key is to have flexibility, because our workflow ebbs for each individual. How many projects you're working on, when are you hitting up on a deadline perhaps on a different project, and also the different phases of the project. So just because you decided up front that you're going to be handling spec coordination throughout the life of the project, that doesn't mean at some point that you're going to have to make a change or that you're going to have to share that responsibility. And I think, again, flexibility is really important. And there's a lot of overlap between the project manager and the various members of the design staff. A lot of us may consistently work with the same team members over and over again, but sometimes you might find you're working with a completely different team, people that you don't know very well. And I think it's important to discover the strengths of each teammate and try to make decisions based on people's individual strengths and sort of who does what on that particular project. You also want to make sure that you're learning from each other and you're mentoring along the way so that you're building the skills of your teammates. I've had this old adage I've said over and over again that, if there's a task in front of you that you can do very quickly and get done, but there's somebody that's junior that's never done it before, think about handing that off to them. They may not get it 100%, but maybe they'll get it to 90%. And then you can give them comments, feedback, and hopefully the next time it's a task that they can handle on their own. That's the only way we advance our folks, right? Just because you may be sort of working under a project manager doesn't mean that you aren't helping to shoulder the responsibility of the project. Our PMs are a lot of times they're juggling multiple projects, and it may be easy to have something slip between the cracks. So, if you see something that's being missed, it's your responsibility to say something, step in, and to assist. You're also going to likely share responsibility for communication with the client and the consultants. And you're also going to have responsibility involvement with the budget and schedule and fees and really the overall team management. All of this is only possible if we have really good communication. Creating a communication plan at the beginning of each project is important. It may seem like sort of silly, well, we can all talk to each other, we'll figure it out as we go along. But if everybody has an understanding of their roles and responsibilities, I think it really helps with the confusion sometimes. You know, there are a million different ways that our project managers and our design teams can organize and communicate project information, everything from regular project meetings to spreadsheets or, you know, shared to-do lists. And, you know, we don't have a formula of how you communicate. So I think it's important to talk about it. We do have our project planning guide, which is currently being updated and will be on the wiki. You guys have probably seen that before. We're going to put it in a sort of more of a digital format. Are you guys familiar with that? Okay. But that's just one tool. And I think you've got to sort of be creative in how you communicate with your team. You know, meeting just for the sake of meeting gets old. You know, you need to make sure you have a purpose and that you're figuring out when's the best, how many touches that you need on a project. So what are the key responsibilities for a project architect or an interior designer? First and foremost, you are the design champion for the project. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of this role. Every project's going to be hit with budget and schedule constraints and difficult clients and a million different things that are going to stand in the way of good design. Your job is to be that advocate for good design. But you don't have to do it alone. You know, we've got resources across the firm. And now with Brian Wurst and Danny Adams are going to be hopefully a good resource to help you with design direction. And they've worked on so many projects where maybe they've hit a budget challenge and, you know, particular material is not going to be available to that project anymore. They can help you with alternatives or coming up with a different direction. You know, we've really got to make sure the project is a success, not only from a client satisfaction point, but also the design direction. And, you know, one of the things that we kept saying over and over during our recent evolution process is that we have all got to stop worrying about asking for help. You know, with the resources of over 300 people, you know, no one should be ashamed to say, if you get to a point in a project where the design is just not working, you know, it's not quite there, ask for help. You know, there's so many people here to help. And you're going to hear more about this with the next session on Design First just later this month. And as a project designer, you're going to be making a million decisions in the life of the project. You know, you've got to deal with materials and systems and detailing and coordination. And just, I mean, I've heard the statistics before that it literally can be over a million different decisions that get made. And the sheer volume can be overwhelming. But I think that the key is to make sure that you're prioritizing good design decisions throughout the life of the project. Again, design excellence can sometimes, you know, really get lost in the flurry of budget and technical constraints on a project. Try to schedule regular pinups and reviews with our design leaders, with members of Alchemy. But, you know, your primary job is to be really an advocate for good design. And then another key role is to really help to tell the story of your project, which is going to be vital for marketing efforts in the future. Can you capture the design thinking that went into the project? That's something we're going to emphasize more and more, is that, you know, keep those early sketches, come up with the dialogue and the story of how you got to where you did. What are the key design nuggets, and how do we respond to solving our clients' problems? And if you're not able to tell a compelling story about the design decisions that went into a project, odds are it's not going to be a really successful design project.
Maybe I'm the anomaly, I guess is what I'm saying. And like David, yes,
I'm picking up here.
We're just in that situation where we feel like we're having to grab a resource.
This is weird.
So slammed with these other offices and projects, and then we're kind of like, hey,
hello.
Like,
Hello.
stuff falls through the cracks or it gets missed, and I'm like, you know, David,
We are picking up somebody else's meeting. Hello. That was weird. Okay. Okay. And then we're back to communication again. You know, a lot of times the project manager maybe has the primary responsibility of communicating with the owner. and the consultants. But it's your job to ensure that the project manager is up to speed on the design decisions that are being made. There's nothing worse than a project manager not knowing what his team is doing, obviously. And, you know, depending on how you've divvied up the roles and responsibilities, you may have a lot of direct contact with both the owner and the consultants. It's your job to coordinate and provide consistent messaging so that the PM is not telling the owner one thing and you're telling them something completely different. And then finally, as a designer, you've got a wonderful opportunity to find the particular niche that you're really interested in. Maybe you're passionate about designing schools or healthcare, SP, or you really love the interaction of the programming process. Grow your knowledge, continue to learn throughout your career, and most importantly, make yourself indispensable, because the more you can learn and grow, the more this firm needs you, and again, it will really elevate you in your career. So, you know, we talked about a lot of different career paths and opportunities at LS3P, but we thought it'd be interesting to hear from one of our senior project architects and associate principals about their career path. So we want Dan Schaefer to tell you about his job and his career. Dan?
We can't hear Dan here.
Very bad. There you go.
Okay, now we can. Thanks.
Okay, are we unmuted? Can everyone hear me? Raise your hand if you can hear me. All right, awesome. Well, thank you, Catherine. Well, this was a really kind of fun exercise for me. I'm thankful y'all asked me to do this, because it's very rare in your career you have a chance to look back retrospectively on your career. We do every year through our performance evaluations, kind of reflect on the year, but it's really interesting for me to kind of look back over 16 years now. It's hard to believe. I had hair when I started as a young architect in Charleston here, and you can see a picture of me on the screen now. Lots has changed since then, but I thought I'd kind of break up my talk today and talk a little bit about the background and the types of experiences I've had here at LS3P, and look at kind of an overall, I see three distinct, at least for me, career phases that I went through in the last 16 years. I was going to share some insights from there. And then finish up, I have some takeaways from my time here at LS3P, some key principles that I think have helped set me up for success and a long-term career trajectory. So I'll start out with kind of background. I was hired on here in 2003. I'd worked a short stint for about 9 months with another firm in town, was hired on for a large academic medical center project. It was a big replacement hospital here in Charleston. It was probably the largest project to date that I've worked on in my career. It was a 600,000 square foot replacement hospital. So I tell everyone I learned healthcare by indoctrination. I was thrown into a very large and complex project, and it was a great experience for me to really learn a lot of facets about process. We had the privilege of working with MBBJ, which is a nationally renowned design firm, and just seeing their design process and how they approached a large urban project had a lot of great takeaways for me, and spent the next really 10 years in healthcare just refining my skill. It was really a labor of love. I found a lot of passion in that work because I really like the humanitarian aspect of healthcare work, where you're create environments for people to heal and learn. So I really latched on to that market sector. And then about maybe 2010 timeframe, healthcare reform started happening, changes in regulations. We started doing less of the big healthcare work, and we really found an opportunity to move into higher education. There was some shortage in nursing staff, so we took healthcare to higher ed. So I got an opportunity to kind of switch gears, switch teams, and start working on some higher education projects, which was a wonderful opportunity. So we started in that health sciences arena, and then later moved into doing more of the advanced manufacturing, which moved us into some of the technical colleges. So started out in healthcare, moved to higher ed, went into some more lab, advanced manufacturing type spaces, and then as of most recently, moved downstairs in our office to help out with corporate commercial. Needed some folks with a little more experience. It was a great opportunity to mentor. So I've been very fortunate in my career to work on a lot of project types. So I kind of consider myself a little bit of a Swiss Army knife where I can do just about anything. I've done a brewery down to a project you'll never see on a project sheet, a Bojangles. I did some design to help get a Bojangles through a design review board. So one of my takeaway from all this is you're in a great place in this firm, is that we're so diverse in terms of our project types, whether it be a worship project, an education project, a commercial hospitality project. There's a lot of opportunity to grow and find where you can be passionate about, because there I think you find the most success in your career. If you can find an area you love to work in, I'd encourage you all to reach out to your leaders if you want to take an opportunity and explore another project type. Just ask. I think you'll find yourself richly rewarded. So looking at an overall, I mentioned some phases in my career. I found that the early part of my career was really a phase of learning from others. We have a really deep bench here in LS3P and a lot of talent. So I spent the early part of my career really learning from folks. That was kind of the discovery phase. You're going through AREs, you're learning all about how to put a project together, life safety, code, how to document a building. So I spent a lot of time, and you can ask any of the folks I worked with, just really kind of probing and asking questions. I encourage you to do that as you get into projects. There's discovering and trying to learn things on your own, but when you hit those kind of bumps in the road, or you get to a point where you just don't know quite where to go, I really encourage y'all to reach out to your PMs and other folks around your studio to help, because I grew so much in that time period by just trying to absorb as much as I can from the more seasoned folks that were around me. And across offices, we've got great talent. And one of the things you'll see coming out with the new dashboard is we're going to have a inventory of the skill sets that are available by employees. So you'll be able to type and search in a database. I'm working on a retail project. I've not done one before. You can find that sector leader or someone that has experience, and you know exactly who to reach out to. So then the middle part of my career, I really found that became a phase of exploration and innovation for me. So I early on saw design as a path that I really wanted to pursue. I was very passionate about design. So I really started exploring design. And the only way you can really do that is by diving in. So I remember for me, it was New Hanover Regional Medical Center. It was a big hospital project. We had a lead designer. She was a senior PM, was doing a fabulous job. But we started getting some feedback from the client about wanting to explore some different directions. And I just reached out and I said, hey, why don't we all independently work on some designs and let the best idea rise to the top? And it kind of took that initiative to say, I want to participate. I want to jump in. You know, I feel like I have some good ideas. And it really changed the way our group at the time approached design. We started seeing everyone on our team as a collaborator, and everyone had a purpose and was a contributor in the process. So I'd encourage y'all to offer to help, dive in, sketch a lot. If you publish, you'll start to be seen in the office as someone who's passionate about design and wants to design, and you'll see really quickly people will seek you out for input. So part of it's you taking the first step to start that process. I'd also say we're really embedded in our community. So become a student of your city. If we're doing architecture in the city, we need to understand the context we work in. I think it's really easy as a young designer to kind of put your head down at your desk, you put your blinders on, and you just kind of work within your little bubble. Well, there's a whole complex and dynamic world, lots of things going on politically, socially in our communities. I think we need to understand that as designers so that we develop appropriate solutions. So I encourage y'all to get out and really experience and understand your city. And then professional development, you can grow a ton. The firm has been so very generous over the years with professional development allotments. And I heard a statistic recently that there's a very small percentage of that actually gets utilized. The firm has made an investment to help you grow. It's a matter of you reaching out and saying, I'll do that, and finding those opportunities to go to our conference. If there's a workshop or something that's going to help you develop or hone a craft or skill, I'd encourage y'all to participate and go and see and get outside the office, bring that back, and then disseminate that amongst your peers. So that's kind of the middle phase. And then I'm not quite there, entering into what I would say the third phase. It's kind of completing the cycle, which becomes a continuous loop, is
sharing knowledge with others. So once you become established as a seasoned project architect or senior architect, you have a great opportunity to share that knowledge, to give back and to mentor. And I'd highly encourage younger staff with summer interns just to share what you know, because they were in your shoes one time. And I think it's true, and it's often said that the teacher sometimes becomes a student. We have a very talented pool of young folks coming into the office all the time, and they've got new ideas, they're learning new techniques, and I think we need to leverage those and learn from them. So I think there's a great opportunity to keep that knowledge cycle through the firm. The other thing we need to do is not huddle. I think we're very good at taking our work and saying, I've got this, I know how to do it, and hold on to it. We're not going to grow as a firm unless we're all growing stronger. So look at ways you can empower others, give them opportunities to try something, give them enough leash that they're not going to, fall off the end, but you're there to support them, but give them the opportunity to grow, because that's how you're going to grow and that's how they're going to grow in their profession. Something I heard Catherine say at the very beginning of the talk, for a viable and successful career path, I absolutely do not believe you have to move up the corporate ladder of becoming a project architect, senior architect, project manager, principal, sector leader, CEO, XCOM, all that. We have invested highly in design first. We need designers. People are going to be passionate about design. I can think of no better person in the firm than Brian Wurst and Danny Adams who embody this, that there is a viable career path for advancement in the firm through design. So I encourage you, if you're passionate about that, or any matter for that thought, if you're passionate about sustainability, go become LEED accredited, go pursue continuing education, become an expert in sustainability. There is a path here for you to grow in that. Jen Howell is a recent example. She's one of our marketing coordinators here in Charleston. She's a graphic designer. Well, she saw the power of graphics in our projects, and she's created a model which now we can sell as a service to our clients, where environmental graphics, she's elevated that, and that was one of her passions. So if you find something you're passionate about, pursue it, would be my suggestion there. And then I'll just leave you with a couple, and I don't know how much time Catherine planned on me talking here. I can probably go on for a while, but I'll give you some key principles I think are important takeaways after looking back over my past 16 years. One is to stay inspired. I think it's very easy just to fall into a rut and settle for mediocrity. I just encourage you to go see architecture, go experience great projects, find out what inspires and gives you passion, because I think we're better architects when we stay inspired. Be open to criticism. I think too often we get our feelings hurt, and we're sometimes sensitive as designers. I think in the design process, the best idea always rises to the top, and that idea might not necessarily be your idea, but always contribute and let the best ideas rise to the top, because I think together, if we're all contributing, we're going to come up with the best solutions for our clients and projects. And that goes along with being collaborative and just understanding that everyone on your team is valuable and an active contributor. And so that we shouldn't look at teams with hierarchy. I don't believe teams should be vertically hierarchical. We need to have horizontal teams where everyone's contributing. The spec writer is as important as the PM on a project, because without specs, the project's not being built right. So just understanding the value that every member brings to the team, I think, has been important. I mentioned finding your passion. And then, because at the end of the day, truly successful people love what they do, and they figure out how to make a career path out of that. And the final point I'll lead to, and we talked a little bit about engaging your city. LS3P is known for being very community focused and invested in our communities. We need to embed ourselves in our communities. It helps us form relationships. So I highly encourage everyone, if you're not involved in an organization outside the walls of LS3P, get involved. Go find an organization that you want to support, volunteer, do something that gets you out into the community. You become an ambassador for LS3P, and you meet so many great people, and you don't know where down the road that may lead to an opportunity, a project. Helping build your network is really important. For me, that was AIA. I was invited to serve in AI Charleston, and that's where I've really found my passion and leadership through serving the institute there. But it doesn't have to be AIA, it doesn't have to be a AE industry organization. It can be your local church, it can be a food bank, it can be some organization in town that gets you out and engaged in the community. So that's kind of what I prepared in my head. If I'll open it up. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to share more.
Dan, so you were very purposeful in making the decision to stick with design and not go into project management, and you've been happy with that decision, right?
I have. I mean, I love to design things. I mean, at the end of the day, that's where to separate myself from still being involved in projects, I think I'd lose something. I'm sure I could learn and be a great project manager with a lot of training, but my passion, I think my skill sets are less in managing people and more in helping with design and projects. So that's been where I've tried to focus my energy. I inevitably have taken on, just through moving up in the ranks a little bit more of a project management role, but that's not where my passion lies. I think we find ourselves doing things we don't always enjoy, like Dell Tech, but it's a necessary evil of the business of architecture.
Any other questions for Dan? Okay, well, thanks, Dan, and we'll have some. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So how many projects are you project architect for at any given time, and what's the threshold you feel like you can no longer keep focus on a good design for that project if you have too many on your plate? Like, what's the magic number for you, and do you have any advice for that?
Sure, that's a great question. It's probably 5 more than I currently have. So over the past, this has probably happened the past 5 years, I've seen a large change, and some of this came out of the recession. I think we learned to do more with less. I remember my first part of my career, I really only worked on 1 or 2 projects. And I think we've learned how to be a little bit, like I said, more nimble, but there's got to be an inefficiency in how we're bouncing from project to project to project within a given day, within a given hour. So I think being able to figure out how to have a little consistency in how we plan our projects is pretty important. I think realistically, I mean, 3 or 4 should probably be the top end. I think at one point I had 10 to 12 active projects this year already, with lots of small studies. I mean, real projects of large scale and size, probably 3 or 4, but I'm not fully engaged in all those given time. So I don't know if that answered your question. I would probably say for me, it's probably, maybe 4 or 5 projects if you're really actively working on them and not just helping out with some conceptual design in the beginning. If they're really projects that you're trying to shepherd and take through a process and engage with clients actively, I would not want to do much more than that.
I have a follow-up question to that. Same person.
Okay.
Do you have any skills or strategies if you do find yourself, I mean, especially with the building industry booming as it is, having more projects than would be ideal to shepherd through good design? Do you have any strategies when you're kind of putting together the team for the first time to try to delegate some of that responsibility? Just scalable strategies. Do you have anything to?
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit when I talked about empowering others. I think David Quick's sitting in the room by me is a prime example of this. I tended to probably micromanage and hold on to too many facets of a project earlier in my career. And it really took folks like Mark Marchant and others to say, Dan, you got to let go. You got to let go of the reins a little bit and let others have an opportunity to grow and flourish and be there to support. And David's a prime example. He's been a PA on 2 of my most recent projects, and I've really given him a lot of autonomy, and it's been a great opportunity to see him grow as a designer. He's got a lot of skill, and had I just sat there and been not letting them have that opportunity, I would be not advancing the firm and letting other people grow. So I would say find and seek out those people and give them opportunities to stretch their wings and have some more design influence and more stake in the project and some time in front of clients and help work on their presentation skills. I think you can be a great mentor and leader to the younger staff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, Laura, back to you.
All right. So kind of following up on what Dan just exhibited with his story of his own path, you're really in control of your own path. And so take some time and think about it. Think about what it is that you want to do and write it down. Map out your path, write it down, because I feel like that, number one, you hold yourself accountable when you write it down. But it's also just something when you are talking with, leadership in your own office or within the firm, it's good to have it kind of documented so you can have those conversations. And it's not to say once you write it down, it can't change. But it's a good way to, like I said, hold yourself accountable. So a couple questions to ask yourself: what interests you? What is your passion? What do you enjoy most about architecture? What inspires you every day? Think back to why you went into the profession of architecture to begin with. And really, again, write it down, kind of give it some serious thought about what you want to do with your career. 20, 30 years from now, is that still what you're going to want to do? Maybe, maybe not, but you need to put some time into thinking about that. We have some great groups that are dedicated to, different aspects of architecture and design. We've got the Integrate team, Alchemy, Advance, and Ignite. And each of these leaders, they are more than happy to talk to you about what these groups do, the resources that are available within these groups, meet with you about your project. So don't be afraid to reach out to any of the folks up on the screen here, because they're here as a resource for everybody in the firm, for every single project. What are your strengths? Think about what you excel at, but then also ask your colleagues, what do they think that you do well? And on the opposite, what do you think your weaknesses might be? A lot of times we have kind of our own view of ourselves and what we do, but it's important to also talk to your colleagues, find out what their thoughts are as well, and encourage them to be open and honest. I mean, we all need that completely honest feedback if we're going to advance ourselves and become better architects and interior designers throughout the course of our career. And then once you've identified a weakness, come up with a plan about how can you improve upon that. And then identify how you can best implement your strengths and talents onto project teams. Talk to other project architects and designers and project managers and figure out how you can best work with everybody in the firm to make our projects even better than they already are. We have this renewed focus on design and the overall design quality of projects that go out of all of our offices. So think about how you can be a part of that, that goal that the firm has set to elevate design.
So just to wrap up, and I think we've said this over and over again, you really have to take ownership of your own career and make decisions about that path, and how again can you become indispensable and a really valuable asset for LS3P. Laura made the point about, getting feedback from people, which sometimes is hard to do. There's some great tools. There's something called a 360 review that some of you may have done before. I think it's available on the web. We use that, gosh, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. We did a 360 review for a lot of our leadership team, and it allows you to get feedback from people in an anonymous way about what you do well and what you don't. And the other thing I would say is, seek mentors in the company, but also seek mentors outside of the company. People are always willing to help, and go have lunch. And, we'll say, brag about Megan all the time, because that's something she's really done in her career. Even now she'll say, let's go have lunch every few months. And and she asked for feedback about how she's doing. So you don't be afraid to ask for that. And then I just want to note that we have another number of sessions coming up. The next one is really very focused on design, and I think that's May 22nd. I believe it should be on your calendar. And you can see the other pieces that we're focusing on in terms of presentation, relationships, more specialization, and finally getting down to design last, which I'm interested to hear what that is, because I'm not sure what that is. So, the other thing is, we have had the PM training, and that's on the wiki now, and we actually I think it's been moved over into the professional development wiki. We just made that change. So if you have some time and want to listen to that as well, there's some additional good tips to follow. So at this point, we'll open up. Do we have any other questions from across the firm? Discussion points? Anybody?
I just have
SB.
one. Someone mentioned earlier about being open to criticism, and I was wondering if, in general, as a profession, have we also studied how to give criticism? I think part of our education has been so focused around the critique of design, and then when you get into the professional setting, that carries over. And I wonder if there are ways, or if anyone has sought that type of training, so that when you're working together as a team, that you can give criticism in a way that actually helps get the project on track, as opposed to perhaps either hurting someone's feelings, as someone mentioned, or just not really offering advice that's helpful for the project.
Could everyone hear that question?
Could you repeat that? That was we had trouble hearing
Sorry.
you.
Yeah, it was more like a dissertation.
Yeah.
Right? Question.
So
I was just wondering if anyone has come across some sort of training, particularly for our industry, on giving the criticism as opposed to just being open to it. Like how do we do that better?
Laura, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I don't know of any specific training. I mean, I think it all relates to that overall team dynamic. I mean, if you have a good relationship and a good team dynamic to begin with, that an open, honest dialogue should come naturally. I recognize that doesn't always happen, and sometimes there are difficult discussions to have. So I think that's something maybe Catherine, you and I could follow up on and see if there are resources out there to help us all kind of navigate those waters a little bit more smoothly, because I agree, it can be hard to be on the receiving end of that information, and we need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that is constructive and not harmful to the project or the team.
I think, people can get very sensitive, particularly about design, because that feels very personal, right? And we all went through that training. One question I like to ask is, are you happy with the design? Because I think sometimes people, they may have talked themselves into something, but then if they step back sometimes and can be honest about their own work, rather than somebody else critiquing it, you may say, I really wish I could have done X, or I'm really not happy with how this elevation looks. Sometimes that lets them, express where they need help without you coming in and saying, I think this looks awful.
I just want to, this is Jeremy in Myrtle Beach. As far as that, like a specific instruction on that, I have to make sure, but I think there's a book, it's called Creative Confidence. One of the principals, founders of IDEO wrote, and I believe that book has some sort of detail about kind of how they go about the process of critiquing and talking about work. I believe that's the book. I'll have to look back and make sure, but I'm fairly sure that's the book. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Do any other questions? Discussion?
Can you go back to the slide that lists off the different classes that we're going to be, this is Eileen and Raleigh. I was just curious, I don't know if we'll end up touching on this sometime down the road, but if there are any other books or TED Talks or something that kind of help us develop some of those leadership skills that we want to be implementing in our teams. You know, if we're just kind of being thrown, if we've gotten licensed and we're being thrown into leading project teams, but we don't necessarily have at least some of the basic foundations, are there resources that we can look up on our own?
Absolutely, and we've got some great reading material that we've been using in our Leadership by Design series, so we can certainly share that.
Okay.
And Megan is somebody else that's really been very involved in training here with AI locally, and she's got a great list of books as well. And I have a whole stack on my windowsill in my office if anybody wants to borrow them. So, you know, I love to read, and I love reading books about how other people lead and how teams work and how do you break down silos. I mean, I think that's our biggest challenge at LS3P is we're growing and we're 8 different offices in all these different sectors, but we're all just people and we're all just trying to do a good job. So how do we break the silos down, not hold on to things possessively, but try to get the absolute best work out of everything we're doing? And that's a big question of the day, I guess. So
yeah, and I think part of it could break down between, I guess, like soft skills of how you manage the people on your team, but then also the hard skills of if we're new to leading a project, we might not necessarily know all of the milestones to be aware of down the road. So maybe is there some sort of like cheat sheet to know, okay, we're in this phase, these things normally happen in this phase, these are things that you should probably start getting on your radar, or at least put reminders on your calendar to look into. It's just, I don't know what I don't know.
I mean,
so.
I think the project planning guide may be a good
Okay.
start, and maybe I can suggest to Roger in the advanced group that maybe it can get expanded even further. I mean, it's a checklist right now,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe it can be expand beyond that, where, you know, if there's a particular task, there's a link to something you can go read to help you with how to do this particular thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think the skills directory that we're putting together is going to be awesome, because if you run into a question, again, you can type in code specialist and 5 names will pop up and you can get somebody to help you with it. So we all can't know it all. I mean, we just can't, and it's just too complex. And, you know, we just have to be willing to ask for help at every step of the way. Yeah. Anybody else? No? Well, thank you guys. Appreciate you sitting in, and we'll look forward to the next sessions. And please feel free to reach out with any questions in the future. Thank you.
Thanks.